I always tell people my story started with a picture because that is the one true thing I can point to and say, that was the moment I changed. It was a cold morning in London, the kind that makes your fingers stiff and your breath show like smoke. The streets were already awake. Carts rattled over stones, and voices cut through the air as if nobody had time to be gentle. I was not rich and I was not important. I was just one person trying to hold my place in a city that did not stop for anyone. In my pocket, I had $12, and I kept touching the coins like they were proof that I still had choices. Near the river, I found a seller with a table covered in papers. He had prints, sketches, and old-looking views of London from above. The sheets were thin, but the lines were strong, and I could tell someone had worked hard to make the city feel alive on the page. The seller called out to people as they passed, telling them they could own a piece of the city for a few coins. Most people walked by without looking, like paper could never matter when bread and work mattered more. I almost walked by too, but one print held me in place as if my feet had turned to stone. It was a bird's-eye view of London, and the river ran through it like a wide road made of moving water. Tiny ships filled the river, their sails like pale wings. The city looked crowded and busy, with rooftops packed so close together that it seemed like there was no space left for air. The tallest thing in the whole picture was a grand church with a great dome, standing above the rest as if it belonged to another world. Not far from it was a tall stone column, sharp and straight, and even in the drawing it felt like a warning. The longer I stared, the more I felt the print was not just showing streets and buildings. It was showing a story. The seller watched me with a small smile, the kind people wear when they know you want something, but you don't want to admit it. "You've got a good eye," he said, leaning forward a little. His voice was rough, like he had spent his life outdoors. That one makes people dream, makes them think they know the city just by looking. I did not answer right away, because I was thinking about my $12 and how quickly it could disappear. I was also thinking about how little I owned that felt like it truly belonged to me. I had a coat that was more patches than cloth, boots that pinched my toes, and a small bag with few things inside. Nothing in my life felt solid. That print, for some reason, felt solid. "How much?" I asked, trying to sound calm. The seller looked at the print, and then at me. $12, he said. He said like it was a fair price, and like he did not care if I bought it or not. I almost laughed, but it came out like a short breath. "That's all I have," I said. He shrugged. "Then it's your choice," he replied. "A full belly today or a city in your hands." I hated that he said it so clearly, because it made the decision feel sharp. I stood there with the river wind on my face, listening to the water and the boats and the voices behind me. The smell of wet wood and smoke sat in my nose. I thought about bread. I thought about walking away. I thought about how, in a place like London, you could work hard and still feel like you were invisible. Then I looked at the print again and felt something rise in me, something like pride or maybe hope or maybe just stubbornness. I placed my coins into his hand, one by one. He counted them, folded the print carefully, and passed it to me as if he was handing over a secret. I carried the print under my coat, pressed close to my chest. The paper was cool, but it warmed as I walked, as if it was taking heat from my body. I told myself I had done something foolish. I also told myself it was done, and now I would live with it. Hunger came quickly, as hunger always does, but I pushed it aside and kept walking. I followed the river path because I wanted to match the drawing to the real city. I wanted to see if the print was honest. Along the river, London felt louder than anywhere else. Men shouted to each other from boats. Dock workers dragged crates that looked heavier than their own bodies. A rower pushed through the water with steady arms, and his face looked hard from years of the same work. I saw merchants in fine coats stepping around puddles like they were afraid of the ground itself. I saw children weaving through legs, quick as shadows, watching pockets the way hungry cats watch food. The river was full of movement, and the city seemed to lean toward it, like everything in London needed that water to breathe. When I found a spot where I could pause, I pulled the print out and opened it carefully. The wind tried to tug it from my hands, but I held tight. I looked from the paper to the river, and back again. I couldn't see the city from above, not like in the print, but I could see hints of it. The angles of rooftops, the lines of streets, the way the river curved and carried people and goods, as if it owned them. I felt strange, like I was standing inside a picture that someone else had drawn. It made me small, but it also made me feel connected to something bigger than my own worries. The day went on, and my stomach complained more loudly than the river. I did what I could. I asked for work where I thought someone might need a hand. I carried a bundle for a woman who looked tired and got paid with a small piece of bread. I helped push a cart stuck in mud and got a nod, nothing more. London was not the kind of place that handed out kindness for free. Still, I kept the print safe under my coat, and every time my fear grew, I touched it as if it could steady me. By evening, the sky had turned a deep gray, and the smoke from chimneys made it darker. I found a narrow building with rooms for rent above a loud alley. The owner looked me up and down like he was measuring how much trouble I could bring. I paid £1 for a bed for one night. He pointed me up the stairs without a smile. The room was small, and the bed creaked when I sat on it. The window let in cold air, and the sounds outside never stopped. Footsteps, laughter, arguing, the city breathing like a restless animal. I sat on that bed and unrolled the print again, smoothing it with my hands like it was a fragile promise. In the drawing, London looked controlled, almost neat, even though it was crowded. In the real world, London was messy and sharp and unpredictable. But the print made me feel like the city could be understood, like it had patterns and rules hidden under the noise. I stared at the river drawn on the page and imagined myself rising above the rooftops, watching the city without being pushed by it. That thought felt like comfort. That was the first night I truly noticed how tired I was, not just in my body, but in my mind. I had been living like someone always chasing the next step, the next coin, the next safe place to sleep. I did not know where my life was going. I did not know if I would still be in London a month from then, or if the city would spit me out like it did to so many people. But holding that print, I felt a small, stubborn belief that my story was not finished. Before I laid down, I folded the print carefully and placed it where it would not be bent or torn. I listened to the alley outside and let the noise wash over me. I thought about the seller's words, about a full belly versus a city in my hands. My belly was not full, but my hands did hold something. It was only paper, yes, but it was also a map of where I stood. It was proof that I had chosen something for myself in a city that liked to choose for everyone. As I closed my eyes, I promised myself that tomorrow I would walk again, look again, learn again, until London stopped feeling like a monster and started feeling like a place I could live inside. A few days after I bought that print, I went looking for quiet. London can make you feel like your thoughts are not your own, because the noise fills every space inside your head. So I walked away from the tight streets and the heavy smoke, and I climbed a gentle rise in a wide park where the wind felt cleaner. From up there, I could see London spread out like a rough sea of roofs. The river cut through it like a dark ribbon, and even from that distance, I could tell it was crowded with boats. The city looked almost calm from above, but I knew that down inside it, people were pushing, shouting, trading, stealing, laughing, and fighting all at once. I sat on a bench with my print on my lap. I opened it and let the paper catch a little light. I compared the lines on the page to what I could see with my own eyes. The shapes did not match perfectly, of course, because I was not truly in the same place as the person who drew it. Still, the feeling was the same. London was big, busy, and hungry. I could see that it had more than one face. It could be grand and elegant in some places, and rough and broken in others. And a person could step from one world into the other in the time it took to turn a corner. While I was sitting there, an older man came and stood near me. He did not look like a dock worker or a street trader. His coat was neat, his shoes were clean, and he held a small notebook like it was something valuable. He kept his eyes on the view, not on me, but I could tell he noticed a print because his head tilted slightly, the way people do when they recognize something. For a moment we were quiet together, sharing the same wind and the same far-off noise drifting up from the city. He spoke first, not loudly, but with a calm voice that carried. "You like to look at London from a distance," he said. It wasn't a question, but it also wasn't rude. It sounded like an observation made by someone who liked facts more than gossip. "I do," I answered. "It's easier to breathe up here." He nodded. "From up here, the city looks almost polite," he said. but it's never polite when you're inside it. That made me laugh a little, because it was true. I asked him what he was writing in his notebook, and he told me he liked to note patterns, how people moved, how streets were shaped, how the river carried trade, and how money traveled like a living thing. He spoke of London as if it was not just a place but a machine, built from stone and fear and ambition. It was strange to hear someone talk that way, but it made sense. When you are poor, money feels like weather, something you can't control. When you have money, you talk about it like a tool. He asked me my name and what I did. I told him the truth. I had no steady work, only small tasks here and there, and I was trying to survive without becoming the kind of person I didn't respect. He looked at me for the first time, then really looked as if he was checking whether my words matched my face. I felt my shoulders tighten because I was used to being judged. After a short pause, he said, "If you can walk fast and keep your mouth shut, there's work you can do." I didn't jump at the offer. I had learned that quick offers can hide traps. So I asked what kind of work it was. He told me it was simple, carrying messages, short papers, sealed letters, and notes. Not forever, he added, as if he could tell I didn't want to be a servant of errands for the rest of my life. But it can keep your stomach full while you learn the city. What's the pay? I asked, because hope is easier when it has numbers. He said he would give me $2 a day, and if I did well, there would be extra coins for faster work. It was not a fortune, but to me it sounded like safety. I could buy bread without counting every bite. I could pay for a bed without begging. I could walk into a shop without feeling like I had to apologize for existing. I agreed to meet him the next morning, and that night I slept with my print folded under my coat like a charm. I woke early and met him where he said, near a street where the houses looked sturdier and the windows were cleaner. He handed me my first note and pointed me toward a place I had never been. The paper felt heavier than it should have, not because of its weight, but because of what it might mean. I carried it as if it was a glass cup that could crack if I ran too hard. That first day, my legs learned London in a new way. When you walk without purpose, you drift. When you walk with a letter that must arrive, you pay attention. I noticed which streets were wide enough to move quickly, and which ones were crowded with carts and shouting people. I learned that some alleys smelled like sickness and old beer, and that you should not slow down there. I learned that if you look lost, someone will see it as an invitation. I learned to keep my eyes forward, my shoulders firm, and my hands close to my body. As the days went on, I was sent to places that felt like different cities living inside the same city. In one area, men stood outside shops with polished shoes and calm faces, speaking softly but watching everything. In another area, children ran barefoot over stones, their knees dark with dirt, their eyes bright and sharp. In some streets, women leaned out of windows to throw dirty water into the road, and you had to watch the shadows above you as much as the ground below you. In other streets, ladies stepped into carriages without their shoes touching mud, and it was as if their lives had been designed to never feel discomfort. One afternoon, my employer gave me a note sealed with thick wax. "This one matters," he said, and his calm voice turned slightly hard. "You will deliver it to the man named inside. You will not open it. You will not delay. You will not speak about it." I nodded, and I could feel my heartbeat in my throat as I walked. The city around me seemed louder than usual. Wheels scraped stone. Dogs barked. Men argued. A bell rang somewhere, high and clear. I held a note inside my coat, pressed against my ribs. My mind filled with ugly thoughts. What if someone tried to steal it? What if I dropped it? What if I gave it to the wrong person? I repeated the name and the address in my head like a prayer. When I arrived, I was taken into a room where two men sat at a table covered in papers. Their coats were fine, and their hands moved quickly as they pointed at numbers and lines on the page. I delivered the note, and one of them broke the seal with a knife. As he read, his eyes narrowed. The other leaned in, and suddenly they were speaking fast and sharp, like dogs snapping over food. I backed away, wanting to become invisible. Then I heard one of them say a number that made my stomach go cold. $5,000. He said it like it was a real thing he could reach for, like it was a loaf of bread sitting on a shelf. I had never been close to that kind of money before. I had only heard poor men whisper about numbers like that when they were dreaming or lying. To hear it spoken in a room like this, with calm confidence, made me understand something new. London ran on deals that most people never saw. I left that building with my head spinning. The streets felt the same, but I did not feel the same inside them. I had been living in the lower parts of the city, where a coin mattered and a meal was a victory. But above that world, like another layer of air, there was a world where people traded huge sums with ink and a signature, and their voices did not shake. That night, I returned to my small rented room and opened my print again. I traced the river with my finger and thought about the ships drawn there, packed close together. I thought about how every ship carried goods, and every good carried money, and every bit of money pulled people like ropes pulling boats. I realized the print was not just a view. It was a lesson. It showed how everything was connected. Streets to docks, docks to trade, trade to power. I lay back on my bed and listened to the alley noise outside. I felt tired, but my mind would not rest. I was still poor, still small in a city that did not care about my comfort. But now I had a job, and more than that, I had a way to learn. I told myself I would not stay blind. If London was a machine, then I would study its parts. If money moved through the city like blood, then I would learn its paths. And if I was going to survive here, I would do more than just run. I would start to understand where I was running and why. After I started carrying letters, I began to notice how London could change its face in only a few streets. One road would be loud and dirty, filled with carts, shouting, and puddles that never seemed to dry. Then I would turn a corner, and suddenly the air would feel cleaner, the buildings would look taller, and the people would walk as if the ground belonged to them. It made me feel like the city was built in layers, and each layer had its own rules. I was learning those rules the hard way, by walking through them with a message pressed against my ribs and a deadline pressing against my mind. One morning my employer sent me toward a grand square where the houses stood in a neat ring, as if they had agreed to look elegant together. The doors were wide, the windows were large, and the steps were clean enough to sit on without staining your coat. In the center of the square stood a statue of a king on a horse. The horse's front leg was lifted, frozen in a proud pose, and the king's face looked calm, like he had never feared hunger or cold. Around the statue, people moved slowly, talking in soft voices, and every coat seemed carefully brushed. Even the dogs looked better fed than some men I had seen by the river. I walked through that place like I was holding my breath. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I still felt watched. When you come from narrow streets and cheap rooms, you learn that clean places do not always welcome you. A man with shining shoes glanced at my sleeves, and I noticed how my cuffs were worn and how a small stain near my elbows suddenly looked bright, as if it was shouting. I kept my eyes forward and my pace steady, reminding myself that I was there for work, not to beg, not to steal, not to drift. I was there because someone needed a letter delivered, and a letter was my excuse to walk anywhere. The house I was sent to had a heavy door and a knocker shaped like a lion's head. A servant opened it and looked me up and down in a single quick sweep. He didn't ask my name. He only asked who the letter was for. I gave the name, and he took the paper with 2 fingers as if it might carry dirt. As he closed the door, I heard music somewhere inside the building, soft and distant. It made me think of warm rooms, clean beds, and tables with more food than one person could eat. I had never hated rich people just for being rich, but moments like that could grow sharp inside you if you let them. I didn't let it stay sharp. I walked away and told myself the city was like the river. It carried all sorts of things, and it did not stop to explain why. Still, I couldn't forget how calm those people looked, as if nothing in the world could surprise them. It was a calm of safety. It was a calm of knowing the floor would not vanish under your feet. A few days later, my route took me into a different kind of crowded place, one built for trade, not for comfort. It was an open courtyard surrounded by covered walkways, and it was full of men who moved like they were late to their own futures. Voices bounced off the stone and rose into the air in waves. I smelled ink, paper, sweat, and something sharp like strong drink. People pushed past each other with purpose, and nobody apologized. They shouted numbers, argued over terms, and pointed at documents as if paper was more powerful than a sword. I stood near the edge, waiting for someone to take my message, and I watched the scene like someone watching a storm from a doorway. Men slapped hands together to seal deals. Others leaned in close, speaking fast with their brows tight, then pulled back with quick smiles. The whole place felt like a living mouth, always opening, always chewing, always hungry. I had seen hunger on faces in alleys, but this was a different hunger. This was a hunger to own, to control, to win. When the man I needed finally arrived, he took the letter, broke the seal without looking at me, and began reading it once. His eyes moved quickly. His mouth tightened. Then he waved me away like I was smoke. I stepped back and stayed quiet, but I could still hear the words around me. I heard amounts spoken without shame, amounts that made my daily pay feel like dust. I heard men talk about goods coming by ship, about delays, about losses, about profit. Every sentence felt tied to money like a knot. As I stood there, a man with a sharp nose and clever eyes noticed me watching. He looked about my employer's age, but his face had a restless energy, like he was always planning his next move. He stepped closer and spoke in a low voice that made it feel like we were sharing a secret, even though we were surrounded by noise. "You're the runner," he said. "I've seen you pass through." I didn't answer much, because I had learned that words can be expensive. I only nodded. He tilted his head. "Do you know what you carry?" he asked. "I carry what I'm told," I said, because it was the safest truth. He gave a short laugh. "That's how it starts," he replied. Then he leaned in slightly and spoke again, quieter. He told me that speed could be worth money, and that some messages mattered more than others. He offered me a deal. When he had letters that needed to arrive fast, he would pay me extra, $3 for each rush delivery. Sometimes more if the letter was urgent. My first feeling was excitement, because extra money meant extra food and a better bed. My second feeling was fear, because urgent can mean dangerous. I looked at him carefully, trying to read what kind of man he was. His face held no warmth, but it held interest, like I was a tool he might use. London was full of people who used tools until they broke. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you're quick," he said. Simple as that. "And because you don't talk." I thought of my 1-pound bed, my thin meals, and the way my coat let in wind like a broken window. I also thought of that grand square and how the servant had taken my letter with 2 fingers. I told myself that if London was going to judge me, then I would at least take what I could from it. I agreed to the deal, but I promised myself something quietly in my own mind. I would stay careful. I would not let money make me blind. The first rush delivery he gave me sent me across London in a straight run. My lungs burned and my legs felt heavy, but I didn't slow down. I learned which streets were faster, even if they were longer. I learned where crowds formed at certain hours. I learned how to slip past carts without getting crushed. When I delivered the letter, the man who took it barely looked up, but he dropped coins into my palm, $3, as if it was nothing. To me, it felt like a small miracle. After that, my days became sharper and faster. I didn't just walk through London anymore. I measured it. I counted steps. I watched shadows on walls to guess the time. I began to see the city the way my employer's friend had described it, like a system. Every street led somewhere. Every door hid a different kind of life. Every message carried more than ink. It carried power. At night, when I returned to my room, I would unfold my print and study it as if it was a teacher. In that bird's eye view, London looked almost organized, but now I knew the truth inside those lines. I could imagine the shouts at the river, the quiet in the elegant squares, and the loud hunger in the trading courtyard. I could imagine the money moving from hand to hand, like quick fish in dark water. The print had become more than paper to me. It had become a reminder that London was not one city. It was many cities stacked together, and I was learning how to move between them without being swallowed. Still, as I counted my new coins and felt proud that I could pay for bread without fear, I noticed something else too. The more I ran for urgent letters, the more I felt the city pulling at me. It wasn't just asking for my speed. It was asking for my trust. It was asking me to stop questioning. And that made me uneasy, because I had learned that the most dangerous thing in London was not a dark alley. It was a smooth offer spoken with a calm voice, the kind that made you forget to ask what it would cost later. By the time I reached the end of that season, my feet knew London better than my own hands. I could tell where I was by the smell alone. The thick coal smoke near crowded streets, the sour stink of old drink near certain alleys, the clean soap scent where the houses were proud and the steps were scrubbed. I had become faster, tougher, and quieter, and I had learned that London does not care how good you are. It only cares what you can do for it, and how quickly you can do it. Some nights I counted my coins and felt proud. Other nights I held my print and felt nervous, because I could sense the city trying to shape me into something sharp and cold. The river stayed at the center of my life, even when my routes took me far from it. No matter where I ran, the day always seemed to bend back toward the water. It was crowded with boats and heavy with sound, or slapping the surface, ropes creaking, men calling out prices, and gulls circling like they owned the sky. The river smelled of wet wood, salt, and old cargo. It carried everything: barrels, cloth, spices, letters, money, and stories. If London was a machine, the river was its moving belt, pulling the city forward without rest. One afternoon, my employer gave me a sealed letter and did not meet my eyes when he handed it over. That alone made me uneasy. He said it was urgent and pointed me to a place near the river, where stone walls rose high and hard, like a warning made into a building. He did not speak the name of the place like it was special, but his voice had a careful edge. I tucked the letter inside my coat and set off, trying to keep my thoughts calm. Still, as I walked, I felt the seal press against my chest as if it had weight beyond paper. As I got closer, the air felt colder. The river nearby looked darker, and the shadows from the walls fell across the water like long fingers. Guards stood at points where they could watch anyone coming and going. When I gave my reason for being there, one guard took the letter's outer note, checked a name, and stared at me as if trying to decide what kind of trouble I could become. Then he stepped aside and let me pass. Inside, the stone under my boots felt old in the streets outside, and every sound echoed as if the building was listening. I delivered the sealed letter to a man with a stiff posture and a face that did not change. He broke the seal without hesitation, read quickly, and nodded once as if the words only confirmed what he already knew. He said nothing to me, not even a simple thanks. When you deliver letters, you learn that silence can mean many things. Sometimes it means power. Sometimes it means danger. I turned to leave with my hands empty and my mind full. Outside again, I took a deeper breath, hoping the open air would make me feel lighter. But as I walked toward the river steps, I saw something that stopped me. A small group of men stood together near the water, watched by guards. Their hands were tied. Their clothes were plain and worn. One of them looked young, too young to have the tired eyes he had. A boat waited close by, rocking gently as if it was impatient. The river made its usual sounds, calm and uncaring, while these men stood as if time had narrowed down to one terrible moment. I do not know exactly why that scene struck me so hard. London was full of suffering, and I had seen hunger and bruises before. But this felt different because it was so official, so controlled, so calm. The guards were not shouting. The people around were not screaming. It was like the city was doing a quiet task, the way a butcher cuts meat. One of the tied men glanced up, and for a breath of time his eyes met mine. There was no drama in his face, only fear held down by shame. In that moment, I felt my stomach tighten, and something inside me woke up. I walked away, but the image followed me like a shadow. The letter I had delivered might have been nothing, or it might have been part of what I had just seen. I could not know, because nobody told runners the whole truth. But I could guess. And for the first time since I had begun making extra money from rush deliveries, I felt sick about how easy it was to be useful in the wrong way. It made me think about the man who paid me extra coins, and how calm he was when he offered urgent work. It made me think about my own hands, how they took money, without always asking what the money was tied to. That night, I returned to my room and locked the door, though the lock was weak and mostly for comfort. I lit a small candle and unfolded my print. The paper looked peaceful in the low light. The river in the drawing was full of ships, and the rooftops seemed neat, almost tidy. It was strange that a city could be drawn in such a clean way when the real city felt rough enough to scrape skin. I traced the river line with my finger and thought about how the river carried more than goods. It carried power. It carried fear. It carried people who had no choice. I laid the print down and counted my coins. I had more than I used to. I could afford better food. I could pay for my bed without begging. I could walk with my head a little higher. But I realized I had started to measure my life only in coins and speed. Every day was a run. Every day was pressure. And the more I ran, the more I risked becoming the kind of person who does not look up long enough to see what is happening beside the road. So I made a decision that felt small but heavy. I stopped taking the special, rush letters from that sharp-eyed man. When he offered me another, I told him I was too busy. When he offered more money, I said no again. I expected anger, but he only looked at me like I had become less useful, like a tool that no longer cuts clean. After that, he stopped calling me over. I lost the extra coins. I also felt my breath return, slow and real, like I had been holding it for weeks without noticing. Without the rush work, my pay became plain again, steady but not large. I had to be careful with money. I returned to saving slowly, one step at a time. I saved £1, then £3, then £10. I learned to live without chasing every chance for extra coins. It was hard at first because London teaches you to grab what you can before it disappears. But I remembered the tied hands near the river, and I told myself that some money costs too much. As weeks passed, I found another way forward, not by speed, but by attention. I began talking to print sellers, booksellers, and travelers. I learned which views of London people wanted to buy and which ones they ignored. I started buying small prints when I could afford them and selling them again for a little more to people who wanted a memory of the city. It was not a grand business, but it was mine. I wasn't just running anymore. I was choosing. I still walked the streets every day, and I still saw the city's extremes. The rich squares and rough alleys, the clean doors and the dirty river steps. London did not change, but I changed inside it. I learned that in Europe, where people talk about power and trade and greatness, a person can still be swallowed if they forget themselves. I did not become famous, and I did not become rich enough to throw coins without looking. But I became something I respected, a person who could survive without closing his eyes. And when I tell my story now, I always go back to that first print. I tell people that paper cannot feed you, but it can teach you where you stand. It can remind you to look up. It can help you remember that even in London, where everything moves fast, you still have a right to choose what kind of life you're building, one step, one coin, and one honest decision at a time.